Right. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to Camille for the introduction. And before I start my presentation, I really like to thank Professor Lynch, my dean, Professor Camilo Mottese. Also, I would like to thank my boss and friend, Professor Yazdifar, and of course, my VC, Professor Mitchell, and the committee for inviting me to deliver this inaugural lecture. This is something that I do kind of relatively often. I feel very, very fortunate to be invited to give a lot of different talks pretty much all over the world. The last one that I did, it was a few weeks ago in India. I had the opportunity of being a keynote speaker in an international conference in the Indian Institute of Management in Shillong. Then from there, I flew to Vellore, and I was another keynote speaker in an international conference in Vellore Institute and Technology. Then some colleagues from that region in India said, well, Jose, you are around. Can you please come and be a keynote speaker of another conference? They let me know 2 days before. And I said, well, why not? So I did a very long trip so I can go to Madras and be another keynote speaker. So I went to Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. Then I came back to Shillong and they say, Jose, can you please talk to our operation management students in Shillong? And I said, yeah, that should be fine. So no problem, few students in one small room. When I got there, actually there were 180 students waiting for me. And I said, okay, that's fine. So it's something that, again, I'm very fortunate because I do kind of relatively often. I remember when we had the pandemic as well, so many institutions in the world, but I would say possibly most of the institutions, like us, went into online. Then it was very, very easy to organize, seminars, workshops, conferences, et cetera. And I was invited very often to talk online. It was 2 times, 3 times a week for a very, very long time. So what I want to say is that although I am very fortunate in that respect, very, very rarely I do this here at my own home, the University of Darwin. And because of that reason, I feel very, very grateful. I was waiting for my opportunity since a few months ago, and I thought, oh, when would that be my opportunity to deliver my inaugural lecture? So when Professor Lynch contacted me back in December, I said, absolutely. So I will make myself available in January, and well, here I am. So thank you so much for that. Before starting my presentation, just let me talk a little bit about myself. But not in the way in which Camille did it, in a very formal way, trying to, present me like if I were Superman or something like that. Well, I would like to do it in a more personal way. And why is that? Because actually, the person that I am comes from 3 different priorities that I have in life. And obviously, that shapes a lot the work that I do for my university and the research that I do also for the University of Derby. My life is not that complicated, I would say, in terms of priorities. I don't want to be a football star or a rock star. I don't want to be a millionaire. Actually, I don't have anything of that ambition. And when they say, Jose, you are recognizing your field of operation management, are you happy with that? I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's good. Something that I am actively seeking. So I work very, very hard. And that happened just a kind of default. But that comes from my priorities in life. This is my family. So it's a small family. This is Alex. She came with me 20 years ago. Actually, today is Wednesday. On Monday, she celebrated 20 years of being here in the United Kingdom. She came with me when she was 19. She's going to be 40 this May. I was 28 at that time. And I go to what I call them champions or hooligans sometimes because my house is really very, very chaotic. And Camille was asking me before coming, Jose, your family in here? And I said, no way, Camille. If they come, this room is going to be a complete chaos. So this is Aiden. He's 10-year-old, and I call him Chang. And actually, he's a national Taekwondo champion. He got his black belt in kickboxing in December. And he's 6 years old, and he's also a green belt in Taekwondo and green belt also in kickboxing. And Adam is the reason as to why I need to come every single Sunday to the university, because he also plays competitive football. And surprise, surprise, the matches are here in our football pitches next to our sports center. So I need to be here every single Sunday, apart from coming during the week. And obviously, Alex, she's my rock. She's the person that has always been supporting me. And when I said, Alex, I got an opportunity to work in Derby, what do you think? And she said, well, if that is what you want, I will be there with you. It doesn't matter what. And another of my priority is that one, which has become nowadays my third priority. So for me, actually training kickboxing nowadays is very, very important. It's part of my life. I started 5 years ago, and if everything is well, in the 26th and 27th of September, I will have my black belt grading. I will be having 2 days of grading. The second one, I will need to do a lot of sparring fighting. And one of those fighting will need to be with 3 people at the same time. One of them is a second dan Kyoshi karate black belt. So somehow I will need to survive if I want to be a black belt. And I will have competitions this year in May, June, and November as well, and in August as well. So this is very, very important as well. It has got me to be very strong, not only physically, but mentally. And actually that strong mental ability is what I need to do my job as well. So what I have in here, it comes from a lot of the input from my family or from my other priority, which is my training as well. The University of Derby. So today is the 17th of January. On the 9th of January this year, it was my 15th anniversary working for the University of Derby. So I started in 2009. I remember Professor Angela Dean and Professor Elias Orafish having my interview here in this building. And when Angela and Elias, they had faith in me. I didn't have a lot of experience teaching. They said, yeah, well, you look motivated. You are kind of, yeah, your CV is kind of good. You are young. Yeah, we will invite you to come and work for us. So I worked in the School of Technology at that time with Elias and with Angela for about 3 or 4 years. Then at that point, it was 2013, more or less. Well, 13, 14, when the Center for Supply Chain Improvement that I am heading now was created. And Professor Ming Lim, who now is a professor in Glasgow University, invited me to come and work with him. So I moved from the School of Technology to the business school as a senior lecturer in operation and supply chain management. At that time, the business school did not have a single professor. So there were no professors at that time. And I remember when I was working in technology about 15 years ago, the professors and the scheme that we had in the university, it was possibly not the best. I knew some professors that were teaching 18 hours a week. My record teaching as a lecturer was 22 hours a week, you know, and being in front of the classroom for an entire semester. So it was very, very difficult. And since that time until now, things have massively changed in a very, very positive way. I don't think that we have been in a better position as we are now. I feel that we are much more stronger than we were 15 years ago. And obviously there are a lot of reasons for that. The leadership that we have in our college since Camille Kay, it has massively expanded the research capability that we have. When Professor Mitchell joined us as well, the university, I can see and feel the difference. So I feel very, very proud of being working for this institution. If I'm very honest, I mean, I have received a lot of different options and offers to work for other institutions in the UK and abroad. And in terms of economic gains, well, yeah, I've been very, very big ones. But I have never thought in moving to other farms because I feel very, very comfortable. I feel that Derby is my home, and hopefully, and this is where I'm crossing my finger for and praying to God, I will finish my career in 20, 25 years here where I started one day. So this is a little bit of me in terms of my 3 priorities. Now, I remember when I was talking to Ming, and I appreciate a lot Ming because he was my mentor at that time. I learned a lot from him, and he's almost my age, but he was well advanced than me, and he had progressed much more. He said, Jose, well, we are in the area of operation management. And right now, our field, I consider that we can make a massive contribution towards a big problem that we have at the moment. Which one is happening? And he said, well, the environmental sustainability issue that we got as a society is very, very big. And there has been very little exploration of how our profession can contribute to address that problem. And since that time, Ming and I, and then the rest of my team started refocusing our area of operation management to address and to consider that problem. Operation management is all about being more efficient, being more productive. If I look and talk about operation management in terms of a business school, in a business school, you will normally have different teams or topics. You will have economics, you will have accountancy, you will have finance, you will have marketing, you will have HR. Well, one of those is operation management. And I am very lucky because operation management actually overlaps with engineering. In an engineering school here in the UK, it will still be called operation management. In the US, it would be called industrial engineering. But actually, I can work, and I feel very fortunate for that, either in a business school or in an engineering school. So at that time, again, with me, we said, well, there is a lot about how to help companies to be more productive so they can increase profit. There is a lot of work in how they can reduce waste, etc., etc. But there is not a lot of work as to how our profession can contribute towards environmental sustainability. So the talk that I'm going to be presenting to you is basically how supply chains have evolved to address the environmental problem that we have, how we, operation managers, have acted to try to address this problem. And I will show you that actually we have taken traditional approaches of operation management and then making them evolve or readapt them so then we can consider the sustainable element. But before starting, I mean, the United Nations consider that these are the top challenges that we have as a humankind. So actually, one of the biggest challenges that we have is energy. I mean, we do not have enough renewable sources of energy. So we actually, our economies work based on oil and gas mainly, and these are not renewable sources. At some point in the future, so they are going to be running out. Is that going to be tomorrow? Is that going to be in 10 years, in 50 years? We do not exactly know, but what we know is that they are going to run out at some point. So because of that reason, there is a lot of research by companies and governments as to what other sources of energy we can use. So this is a big, big problem. Food and water security, that's another big challenge. I mean, there are many nations that got problems, people that is starving, etc., etc. I mean, fortunately, we don't have that problem. Here in the United Kingdom, disease and suffering, population growth, etc., etc. So these are the main challenges according to the United Nations. However, for me, the main challenge is that one, the environmental sustainability challenge. And why is that? Because if we continue damaging, if we continue hurting our planet, at some point, we will not have a place where to live. And right now, we don't have the technology where actually we can put some people, in a spacecraft and then move and live in another planet. We don't have that technology. Possibly we will have it, I don't know, in the future. But right now, if we don't have a planet where to live, basically we will not exist. And if we don't exist, all the other problems are completely irrelevant. I remember when I was giving providing or discussing those chats when I was telling you online when COVID came. So basically, one of my points that I was trying to put forward, it was, yes, we got the COVID issue. So nowadays, the world is upside down. So we got our economies closed. We are actually not allowed to go out of our houses, etc., etc. So it's a big problem. What is a problem that we will be coming out in the next couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, etc., etc. So there was a lot of coordination of governments to address it. However, that problem, it will not go that easy as the COVID. And when 4 or 5 years after that, you can see we're face to face. So we actually came out from that problem, but that is still there. So that was a bigger problem, that COVID. And that was one of the points that I was trying to put forward. Global warming, environmental degradation, pollution, habitat restoration, etc., etc. Everything related to environmental sustainability is the biggest challenge that we have right now as a human, right? So how critical is that problem? I mean, these figures are not that up to date, but it doesn't really matter because basically the trend is exactly the same. And what are those figures telling us? Well, basically that in general, our standard of living based on GDP has been increasing, which is very, very positive. I mean, that means that in theory, we should be having better standard of living as a human, guys. The opposite at the downside is that we have been depleting our natural resources. So we have not been able to actually balance our development, our economic development, our industrial development with the conservation of our planet. And that is what has brought our problems. If I show you that graph, it's exactly the same CO2 emissions. You can see industrial revolution at some point in there and increasing. Yes, once more positive, because our economy has been growing, our industrial development has been growing, so which brings more employment, better standard of living. So that's the positive side. The negative side is what we are doing to our planet in terms of CO2 emissions as well. Now, what have been the consequences of that? So point number one, so I was trying to convince you that there is a big problem. I have tried to convince you that the problem is actually big. Now, what have been the consequences of that problem that we have? Well, I mean, you name it. Loss of biodiversity is a big, big issue. I mean, a lot of political issues. Again, we come with the economic and industrial development. You got the Amazon in Brazil, for example, which have been depleted in order to build, factories, in order to build places where people can live, etc., etc. Water pollution is another big problem as well. Microplastic in the oceans, big, big problem that we have as well. The melting of the polar ice caps as well. The ozone layer. I mean, I remember that 2018, I had the opportunity of going to my own country, to Mexico. I had a project funded by the British Academy at that time, and I was invited to deliver a keynote speech. And one of the other keynote speeches was the Mexican representative of environmental matters in the United Nations. And that lady was literally coming from the airport, from having a meeting with some scientists in the United Nations. And then when she was talking to the public, she was saying, according to the modeling that we have done in the United Nations, actually, if we continue with the same trend of CO2 emissions, some regions, some countries in the world will be underwater, not by the year 2090. She was mentioning 2040. And then she was presenting a big, big map in the screen and show it to everyone. So then I turned my head and looked at the audience, and they were absolutely scared of that. So the problem is imminent, and the problem is something that it will be not in the very long term, but possibly in our lifetime or the lifetime of Aiden and Alan, or possibly the next generation. So it's a big, big issue. The ozone layer depletion, that's another big issue as well. Although there is scientific evidence that says that the Earth is curing itself. And I had the opportunity in 2018, and I felt very, very proud of that one. One of the people that was in the audience listening to my talk, it was Professor Mario Molina. I don't know if you have heard about that name, Mario Molina. In Mexico, in all time, there have been 4 Nobel Prizes, 2 literature Nobel Prizes, 1 peace Nobel Prize, and 1 Nobel Prize for science, and that is in chemistry, and that was by Mario Molina. He was one of the main contributors that discovered that actually there was a big hole in the Earth. And he was in my presentation. When I finished my presentation, there was one person that came to see me and said, well, Jose, actually, Professor Mario Molina wants to have a chat with you tomorrow. He's inviting you to go to a restaurant to have some chat with you. And then I was thinking, oh my God, he's like my hero. You know, the only Nobel Prize, the only scientist in Mexico who has been a Nobel laureate. And I said, absolutely, yes, just tell me, the time and the place, and I will be there. No, he will send one of his drivers. He will pick you up from the hotel. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I was over and over thinking, what is he going to ask me? What about my research? What methodologies are used? I couldn't sleep that night. Then the next day, yes, I had a big debate with him. A very, very nice person. But the big debate was nothing about science. It was about who was better, whether Man United or Arsenal. Luckily, I like football, so we had a kind of good debate. He didn't ask me anything about my research at all. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack in 2020. But well, I mean, this is a little story that just came to my mind because he was one of the main contributors of that. Some of the consequences as well. I mean, you can see the climate change. My sister, I mean, I'm from the north of Mexico, very close to the border with US. So in my teen years, I used to go a lot to all the Texas Valley to buy trainers and music, etc., etc. My sister lives in Austin with her family. Right now, they got -8 degrees. And we might say, -8, we can manage that. Well, in Texas, I can tell you that they cannot manage it because it's something that they are not used to. So they got a big, big mess in there. because of the global change. If we talk about, for example, Hawaii last year, big fires in Australia, in Greece, in Spain, etc. Here in the UK, when I talk to some of the people who have been living here in the UK all their life, they say, well, because actually our winter were much colder right than now. So you can see the changes and the consequences of that environmental problem that we have. And just to show you and put even more emphasis into the problem that we have, this is the Catholic Pope Francis talking to the United Nations in 2015. Literally, he was saying, environmental degradation threatens the very existence of human species. I don't think that anybody, or at least not a lot of people, would debate something like that, unless you agree with Donald Trump and his scientists are saying, no, that doesn't exist. So the scientists, they are lying. I mean, we know that it is a big problem. The same is mentioned by Sir David Attenborough, one of my heroes as well. I remember when I was young, having a dinner with my family in Mexico and then looking at some of the programs that David Attenborough was presenting at that time. He was mentioning exactly the same. Climate change is humanity, greatest threat in thousands of years. So the problem is absolutely huge. And actually the problem is threatening our very existence. Now, we got a problem. And the problem is critical. Now, my next point is, have we tried to do something to address the problem? And this is where I'm going to start talking a little bit about my field and what we have done to try to address that problem. I will see that from a business and management point of view, not the engineering or the scientific point of view. Because of obvious reasons, my field is more management and business oriented at the moment rather than engineering and technology based. Have we tried to address the problem? Well, I would say that yes, we have tried to address it. Because of that reason, we got some concepts or initiatives or targets that countries have set to try to address the problem. Sustainability. Who doesn't know about sustainability? 1980s. Nowadays, it's a buzzword. And it's a way of addressing the problem. Does it work or it doesn't work? That's a different matter. But it was proposed in order to try to address the problem. CRC, very similar to corporate sustainability, the green economy. I mean, this is a term that it was very commonly used about 10 years ago as well, but it was proposed similarly to address the problem. Then I remember when I came to the business school, at that time, there was a group led by Christine, Allison, and all the team that were doing a lot of studies in low carbon. Then suddenly that term of low carbon disappeared and it became zero carbon and net zero. And it's actually one of the top priorities and top themes of research that we have in the university. So that theme and that ideology and objective actually were developed to try to address this problem that we have, the environmental problem. Similarly, we got circular economy. I remember Fred Patterson doing a lot of research on circular economy. My team does a lot of research on circular economy. It was also proposed to address the environmental problem that we are having at the moment. Similarly, I was mentioning some targets that have set by governments to address the problem, to reduce CO2 emissions, to be using more renewable sources of energy, etc. So, I mean, very generally, I could say, yes, we have tried to address the problem. How? Well, by proposing some of these concepts and trying to deploy them, in organizations, in societies, etc. Now, where I'm going to focus is, right, as I mentioned, what supply chain have done to try to address the problem. And I will show you once more, and I have already mentioned it, what we have done as operation managers to address the problem. So we have taken traditional concepts that once more companies use to make their operations more efficient, more effective, and bring the environmental aspects so we can consider it as well. So one example of that one, quality. It's a big topic in our area. 1980s, it was a very common word. Every company, I remember when I was doing my first degree in Mexico, wanted to be ISO certified. And we were talking about total quality management, and we were talking about statistical process control. All these are approaches that companies have used in the past to improve the quality, as simple as that. Now, they, in many cases, help companies to provide better quality in terms of their product and services. Now, we, operation managers and industrial engineers, have taken the same concepts of quality management system and reshaping them so actually they can also consider the environmental aspect. The most clear example is ISO 14001, which is an environmental standard. So it's basically following some procedures that companies can implement. So they are not only improving the quality, but they are also being more environmental friendly. And I will not be going into details into what quality management systems are, how exactly this move from this into that one, and then explaining every single one of them. Is not my intention. My intention is just to provide a general overview of what we are doing in our profession to address the big problem that we have at the moment. That is one example. Another example is that we have been from TQM. What that means? Total quality management. I have just mentioned it. So total quality management was very popular in the 1980s. Many companies still practice it. And basically, it's an approach that companies can use to once more improve the quality of the product and services. I mean, as simple as that one. Then at some point, we realized that TQM was not enough. I mean, it was good enough in terms of helping us to reduce costs, to be more productive, provide better quality, but it didn't consider the environmental aspect. So total quality management evolved into what we call total quality environmental management. And total quality environmental management is exactly the same as total quality management, but now the environmental sustainability is embedded within the concept. So companies are not only looking at improving their quality, but also improving the environmental performance. And this is a little research at some point I did with some of my master students. So I was interested, or we were interested in investigating whether companies actually implement total quality environmental management. Very, very small sample, some Chinese manufacturers. And again, we try to investigate the status of TQM, particularly in the Chinese manufacturing sector. Then I will not be going into the methodology and the analysis that we conduct. That's not the point of this. So basically, what we realized with that little study is that companies in China, yes, they do know about TQEM. However, TQEM is not as popular as some other approaches of business excellence or some other approaches that are more related to the environment as well. Example of those approaches are, for example, green supply chain management. So TQEM is not as popular as green supply chain management in the China's manufacturing sector. Reverse logistics, I will be explaining that later on. So TQEM is not as popular as reverse logistics. TQEM is not as popular as ISO 9000 Six Sigma. Camille was mentioning a bit of Six Sigma as well in the introduction. So in summary, companies use TQEM, but it's not very popular. We also identified the main drivers. Why do Chinese companies want to implement TQM? What are the results that they obtain from the TQM implementation? Because you can expect something by deploying this approach and then later on actually not getting the expected result. So we actually investigated that. And if companies want to investigate TQM and they want to implement it, what challenges have they faced when trying to implement it? So these are some of the little aspects that we investigate in relation to an approach that evolved from total quality management into total quality environmental management to bring that environmental sustainability element that I was mentioning. Another approach that evolved similarly to the two that I have been mentioned is that many companies move from traditional production into what nowadays is called cleaner production. And what is cleaner production? Well, cleaner production is exactly the same as traditional production, but nowadays you bring the environmental aspect. How do you bring it? Well, basically, you look at conserving energy. How can I be more efficient when actually running my equipment on the shop floor? How can I save electricity and gas or be spending less in my production process? Once that we consider that, then actually we're already trying to implement and to deploy some elements of cleaner production, looking at designing for the environment. What is going to happen with my product when that it gets to its end life cycle? So once that is not useful anymore, can I recycle it? Or is it going to be there in the environment for the next 200 years? So starting from the design element is also part of cleaner production. principal substitution, resource reduction, etc., etc. So all these elements are related to make it production processes more environmentally friendly. And the theory will tell you, well, if you are more environmentally friendly in your products, processes, and service, actually, you are going to be more efficient. So I will show you in some of the later research that we have done that the more environmentally friendly companies are, the more profitable they will be. So actually, there is an alignment between these two elements. So there is not a contradiction in any of those ones. This is a little bit of the research that me and my team have been doing on the area of cleaner production. I will not be explaining this because every single one of these could be a 2-hour talk from my side, so that's not the intention. So I'm just will be picking randomly picking some of them. For example, that one, which I conducted with some colleagues from Brazil and from Morocco. So basically what we did, it was to identify some lean manufacturing principles. What is lean manufacturing? I will be mentioning it later on, but since I am now talking about lean, I will tell you. Lean was developed by Toyota in the 1950s, and lean management or lean manufacturing is all about reducing waste, implementing just-in-time, implementing Kanban, implementing Pokayoke, etc., etc. All these approaches help companies to reduce waste. So we look at some of those principles with cleaner production principles and develop a benchmarking method that companies could use to actually understand whether in their production processes they are sustainable or not. And we were able to test that method in some companies in Brazil and in some companies in Morocco as well. Then if I look at that one, Industry 4.0, I mean, possibly most of you have heard about that term, Industry 4.0. We are living now in the fourth industrial revolution, in the digitalization era. A lot of companies are moving into the digitalization of the operation. How do they do that? Well, basically implementing what we call Industry 4.0 technology. Some example of those are artificial intelligence or blockchain, for example, or simulation, or the 3D printing or additive manufacturing, etc., digital twins. A lot of companies are bringing all that technology to their operations. Now, what we were looking at in this particular research, it was looking at whether Industry 4.0 enablers also help companies to more easily implement cleaner production and or circular economy practices as well. Again, I'm not going to be talking about what methodology we follow and why it's valid or why it might not be valid, etc., etc. That's not the point. But just to show you a bit of the research that me and my team, people, like Simon, my PhD student Walid, and my team are doing great in that particular area. Another evolution that we have kind of helped to contribute to as operation managers, we have moved from traditional supply chain management into what is called green supply chain management. And what is green supply chain management? Well, green supply chain management is exactly the same as the traditional supply chain management, but now we are injecting that sustainability or environmental sustainability into the activities that we do when we manage our supply chains. I mean, some example of that, for example, it could be, let's say, when we source raw materials, looking and making sure that our raw materials are sustainable, making sure that they produce low pollution. When we talk about, for example, distribution, logistics, big area of opportunity for us to address because it's one of the main contributors to CO2 emissions. So making sure that actually we are or optimize our distribution processes as well. So again, what I'm trying to show you is how our profession has contributed to address this problem. So, and how we have taken some of the traditional concepts and readapt them to bring that environmental element into perspective. So this is a little bit of the research that me and my team have been doing in terms of green supply chain management. For example, that one, lean, I already talked about lean, green practices and process innovation practices. So once that we put them together, do they actually help companies to clean their supply chains? Well, I can tell you that based on that study, yes, companies that actually are able to implement all those three practices will be more environmental sustainable in their supply chains than companies that have not. And it's a little bit part of the research. This one in particular is a bit more optimization and, mathematical modeling and those kind of things as well. but all with the idea of understanding how all those aspects could contribute to make our supply chain more sustainable. And in evolution, and this is what I was mentioning, so basically we got a huge opportunity logistics. I mean, if we want a product to be moved, we need to physically move it. I mean, if it is produced in China and then it's going to be sold in the UK, we'll have the technology where basically the product is there, disappear, and then suddenly appear in the UK. Or we produce it in Mexico and we want to sell it to the US, so we'll have the technology where it disappear in Mexico and appear in the US out of nowhere. So we need to physically move it. And our transportation modes are based on the combustion engine. And the combustion engine produces a lot of different gases. So we got a massive opportunity in here. And we have tried actually to address that issue from moving from traditional logistics into green logistics. So what is green logistics? Well, you got the definition in there. But green logistics is basically making our logistic processes greener by looking for more efficient packing, optimizing our routes as well, optimizing our loading and unloading of product, etc., etc. So once more, we are trying to bring the environmental element into our logistic processes. This is what I always tell the students, especially when I go and talk to them abroad, like the IIM Shillong students. Many of them are going to be the managers, and actually they are going to be part of their government in the future. Because once you go to India and you got the IIMs, basically you got the cream of the cream. You got the best students in India. When I was to Shillong, they were telling me, Jose, you know how many applications we had last year for our MBA? And I said, no idea. Well, we have 3.4 million applications for our MBA. You know how many students we received? No idea. So we received 250. So we got the cream of the cream. And that's why I tell the students, you are going to be the next leader of your industries. You are going to be the next, people in government in your country, in your regions. And these are problems that actually you can start looking at how to address. You may not have the background of being an engineer or operation manager, but still, so you can facilitate in our profession actually that, to try to look for new ways or novel ways or more efficient way of doing things so we can green our supply chain. Now, if I talk about logistics in particular, we got the traditional forward logistics. What is forward logistics? Well, forward logistics, and you can see in that very simple drawing, we extract raw material, then that raw material is transported to the factories produce some product, then that product, one that is finished, is distributed to the retailers, and then we customers go and basically buy it from, I don't know, Alda, Tesco, or we buy it from Kubris, etc., whatever we are buying as a product. Now, we got the reverse one. And what is the reverse one? So we call it, just like that, reverse logistics. I can tell you that if we go back 10 years ago, reverse logistics was not that popular. But now that we have e-commerce, so reverse logistics has become very, very popular. I mean, my wife is fan of buying things online, and sometimes, no, I didn't like this dress. No, it doesn't fit very well. No, it's not what I thought. So I will return it. So actually, there is a reverse logistic process to take back that product to the manufacturer, etc., etc. And you might be thinking, yes, Jose, and how is that environmental sustainable? Well, actually, reverse logistics is not environmental sustainable on its own, but it's an enabler of environmental sustainability, and it supports actually the concepts of circular economy. How's that supported? Well, at the end of a product life cycle, rather than disposing it and throw it away, what can you do with it? Well, basically, at some point, you can recondition the product and continue using it. If it is not working anymore, so you can send it for repair, and then you get it back already repaired, you can use it again, rather than throwing it away, or you can remanufacture the product as well. So, but in order for us to do that one, obviously the product needs to come from the consumer back to some of the players of the supply chains. And because of that reason, we require a reverse logistic process. So once more, reverse logistic processes, from my point of view, are not environmentally friendly per se, but they contribute to it. So they are a key player in that. I mean, an example of remanufacturing, I mean, I can tell you that mobile phone that I put in there just to be checking my time is a remanufactured one. So what that means that somebody didn't want it anymore, instead of throwing it away. So basically, there was a company that was interested in it. That company took the mobile phone, they tested, they possibly did some adjustment in there, and it was almost new, and then they put it on sale. So what is my benefit as a customer that instead of that one costing 700 pounds, it cost me 300 pounds? And for what I wanted, it gave me exactly the same service. So it's helping a company to make some profit. And if the company is making profit, it's providing employment. And if it is providing employment, there is economic development. On the positive side of the environment, someone did not throw away that one, but actually we extended the use of that product. And that is enabled by reverse logistic processes. And that is something that nowadays we operation managers work a lot on. This is an example of some research that I have been doing on reverse logistic process. This particular one is, again, very OR. And what that means, I mean, when we say OM, we're talking about operation management, the strategic side, the soft side. When we talk about OR, we're talking about operation research, much more mathematical, optimization, algorithms, etc., etc. It's not my main strength. Actually, I'm not that clever to be doing things like that one, where I got people that actually does it for me or does it with me. So I'm still able to do some type of research in that particular area of optimization, etc., etc. And this is when we get to the point of circular economy. I mean, another buzzword. What is circular economy? Well, first of all, I need to explain very briefly what linear economy is. What is a linear economy? Well, linear economy is the economic model that we are mainly using nowadays. So basically, we extract some raw material, we produce something with the raw material. Once that the product has been produced, we distribute it, then we sell it, and somebody will use it. And at some point, that product is not useful anymore, we throw it away. And actually, the economy says, yes, this is this is a business model that works. However, there is a condition. For it to work, it means the natural resources have to be unlimited and they have to be cheap. And we know that that is not the case. Oil, gas, and many other resources are not renewable. So this model that actually we are mainly using in our societies are not sustainable over the future. Then some economies from the United Kingdom came and proposed the concept of circular economy. And once more, I remember Fred Patterson doing a lot of research on circular economy at that point. And what is circular economy? Well, basically what I was mentioning before. So instead of a product getting at its end of life being thrown into the landfill or to be disposed of, trying to see what we can do to actually extend its life cycle so it doesn't go to the landfill, so it can benefit more people. We don't need to produce another product because this is still being used. Now, circular economy has become something that many governments believe could be a good strategy to address the problem. If you look at China, for example, a lot of the environmental policies that have been deployed, were formulated and deployed in China, are around the concept of circular economy. If you look at the European Union as well, there is a lot of policies that go around circular economy. In the UK as well, we got good faith about circular economy because of that reason. If you look at some of the research council, ESRC, PSRC, and many others, there is a lot of funding to do research in circular economy. So again, there is a lot of faith in this concept. And obviously, we operation managers have taken the concept of circular economy and used it to what we do. So nowadays, we got the concept of circular supply chain, or also called closed loop supply chains as well. Again, the concept is an economic one, but then we have taken it and readapted it to our using supply chains to make them more environmentally friendly. Now, if we are not talking about supply chains, but we are talking about processes, now we got the concept of what is called circular production system. So it's not the entire supply chain, but also I can look into specific processes of companies and then see how we can make them circular. So actually, instead of being disposing some of the waste of some of the product, how can I recirculate it into my processes or the processes of other companies? That is called industrial symbiosis. What is a waste for me could be raw material for another industry or for another company. So that is being circular. And again, what I'm trying to show you is how we operation managers have taken those concepts to address this environmental problem that we have. Very popular concept. Again, this data is not very current, but it doesn't really matter because the trend is exactly the same. There is a lot of funding for research into circular economy. There is a lot of policies that have been formulated and implemented based on circular economy. If we look at academic publications, for example, I mean, these are just some examples of special issues in journals around the world that are about circular economy. That one, I had the opportunity of leading that particular special issue as well. What I'm trying to show you is how popular circular economy is nowadays, the faith that government and companies and researchers have on that particular approach, and how we have adapted, we operation manager, to actually use it in our supply chain or in our logistic processes. This is a little bit of the research that me and my team have been doing on the circular economy. That one, 2018, but actually it was accepted 2013. So very, very new the concept was at that time, and we were simply trying to investigate some of the awareness of circular economy. Do people and companies in Africa know about circular economy? This one, it was practically based in Africa. If they do, have they implemented? If they have implemented, what circular economy practices they have implemented, what results they have been obtaining, etc., etc. So a bit of the research on that particular area. I remember that paper that we published with Simon and Tony as well from my team in here. So basically, we developed a tool that will help companies to measure their circularity. At the end of the day, it's just a questionnaire that manufacturing SMEs could take, and they can look at the questionnaire, and at the end, they will get a kind of a score, and that score is linked to how circular they are. And basically, we developed that tool, and if I talk about the methodology, well, we conceptually developed it from the literature, and then basically we passed it through a Delphi study, so experts could criticize our tool, and then we could do changes into that tool, and then once that we had the tool already verified, then we validated it in a company in Mexico as well. Once more, it's just a little example of some of the research that we are doing, in this case, on circular economy. More research on circular economy, that one in particular in the mining sector. I mean, yes, you could say, well, circular economy companies struggle to implement circular economy practices because X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but does that apply to every single industry? The same problems that a manufacturing, for example, electronic manufacturing, have to implement circular economy, would it be the same as the problem that a food processing company has, or the same problem that, for example, a service company has? So sometimes we need to contextualize our research so we could understand much better and in more detail some of these concepts. And this is what we did, particularly in the mining sector. This one was developed with some colleagues in Aguascalientes in Mexico. Aguascalientes is the smallest state in Mexico, but it's very, very strong and very rich, I would say, because it got a very strong car manufacturing sector and industry there. I remember that I had the opportunity in 2016 of taking from the UK, with some funding from the British Council, 15 researchers. So I selected 15 early career researchers and took them to Aguascalientes, and the Mexican part selected 15 early career researchers from Mexico. And we had a 1-week workshop over there, once more funded by the British Council. And as part of the activity that we did, it was a visit to Nissan, that has a huge manufacturing plant in Aguascalientes, absolutely beautiful, state-of-the-art plant in there. And obviously, they talk about a lot about the environmental practices and technology that they have implemented as well. So this study, in particular, was based in that very powerful industry in Aguascalientes in Mexico, trying to understand the relationship between eco-innovation practices and circular economy, particularly within the context of the automotive sector. More research into circular economy as well that we have been conducted, some of them related to what I was mentioning, all the digital technology, Industry 4.0 technology as well. More research into circular economy, very, very popular, I was saying, and I got people like Simon, who became an expert on the circular economy. His PhD, it was about the circular economy, and we proposed a concept that is called C-Lean, which means circular lean, and it was accepted for publication in December in a top-ranked journal. So that's very good, because it's Simon research, good paper as well, et cetera, that will help us with our ref, circular economy as well, apply from the point of view and the lens of our area of operation management. Very, very quickly, Another of the concepts that have evolved is that one, Lean, that is telling me, Jose, you have spent already 50 minutes talking. So I can get very, very passionate about this. And I was telling Camille, well, I can do this, Camille, in 20 minutes or in 2 hours. So please tell me. And he said, well, about 50 minutes. So I'm going to start going a bit faster. Lean, I already talked. Yeah, that was another of the points I listened that Camille said to me, do not talk that fast. And I said, Camille, normally I talk very fast. I'm very intense. It's just me. But I hope that still is kind of clear what I'm trying to put forward. So Lean, I already talked about Lean. So Lean manufacturing developed by Toyota. And then at some point, people say, well, Lean helps companies to achieve all that, but it doesn't bring the environmental part. So it was the concept of green Lean at some point put together. So Lean principles and green principles put together. With Lean manufacturing, you got Lean, then you got Six Sigma. Six Sigma was developed by Toyota in the 1980s by Motorola. And then it was put together because Lean had some limitations. Six Sigma had some limitations. So now we got the concept of Lean Six Sigma. Then somebody came with the idea of Green Lean, which is another adaptation of Green Lean. And this is something that has been close to my heart since the time when I was discussing it with Ming Lee. And this is a paper that I published in 2015. And it's basically a literature review. And at that point, there was very little about Green Lean. So I was trying to show what research had been conducted in the area. So everything that you can see in here, every single number is a paper. So the more numbers that you can see, the more paper had existed or had been done, or the more research in that particular area. And I remember that I was in Sri Lanka at some point several years ago, and I was invited to deliver a keynote speech in a conference. And they say, Jose, there is another big conference just around the corner. Do you want to be a keynote speaker? I said, no, thank you very much. Yes, please go. So they took me there. And I said, oh, the conference is a built environment. And I said, what am I going to be talking about, people in the built environment? It's not my area. I don't know. So you want to talk to them about something. So I was talking about some aspect of what I am mentioning to you right now. And when I showed them this, I say, guys, Green Lean applied in your industry gets very little research. So how can you use Green Lean principles to actually embed them in your construction processes? Is it possible? Is it not possible? What limitations can you find? What do you require to do that? There is plenty of opportunity for you to do research in that particular area. It's something that I mentioned to them. Then at some point, we look at the effect of lean manufacturing on environmental performance. I can tell you that according to research, companies that have implemented lean manufacturing will always be more environmentally friendly than companies that have not, just by default, even without knowing it or without wanting. So all these are lean approaches and tools. Total productive maintenance is one, value stream mapping is another one. I will not explain them. And this is the impact that they would have on these environmental performance measures. So it's something that we actually study and that we came as a conclusion. And all this has been already published in good journals as well. A bit of the research that we have done similarly to investigate the practices and the impact of lean on the environment. The previous one and was very conceptual and was based on empirical research survey with experts. This one is actually two cases study. We were investigating exactly the same, but now using a case study approach. So we investigated in some companies in Italy, and the results that we obtained were exactly the same as the previous one. Companies that have implemented lean will be more environmentally friendly than companies that have not. More research on green lean that we have been conducting as well over the years with people, from a lot of different places. Then one day I woke up and said, Jose, so you got lean, then you got Six Sigma, then you got Lean Six Sigma, then you got green lean. So what about green lean Six Sigma? Why not? And then I started just, kind of conceptually looking at, okay, what are the limitations of this? What are the limitations of that, et cetera, et cetera. And if I put them together, can I overcome those limitations? So I dedicated a few weeks, a few months, thinking on those kind of things. And at some point, I wrote that paper, which was also published in a good journal, talking about how putting together all three approaches could benefit companies. Again, I will not be discussing things like that. When if at some point something like that catch your eye, you can contact me and then we can discuss it. I can share the paper, etc., etc. I would be more than keen to collaborate with those that want to collaborate with anything related to that. Just very briefly, and to finish very quickly, this is a tool that was developed for Lean. It's called value stream mapping. Very simple, developed by Toyota in the 1950s. Basically, what you put in here is the representation of a manufacturing process. Every single one of these is an activity that altogether will produce a product. Value stream mapping is used by companies to identify where you can find waste in the process. As simple as that. But waste of what type? Then what me and my team did at some point, it was to take that tool and to readapt it. Instead of being looking at some of the traditional metrics, such as cycle time, how fast the machine works, change over time. So if you are producing one product and then you want to produce product B, so you need to change the format of the company, how long of the machine, how long it takes you to do that change over. So these are the traditional metrics that Lean would be looking at. So we took the tool and readapted to now consider those environmental metrics. So now we were looking for environmental waste as opposed to simply be looking for the traditional efficiency waste. It's something that we did. I had the opportunity of actually testing that little tool in some companies in Peru. And one thing is the tool. So this is the tool that you can use. Yes, but another story is how you use it and how you implement it. So because the tool could be very good, let's say, very effective, but if you do not implement it or use it effectively, it might not work. So then, as part of our research, we have produced several approaches that would help the companies to actually effectively use and implement that tool as well. And we have the fortune of actually testing this implementation framework of the environmental value stream mapping in some companies in South America, in Peru in particular. This is another approach that we produce, that we propose for companies to implement environmental value stream mapping. This was tested in some companies in Morocco. Because I do a lot of work with a lot of different companies and colleagues around the world, so it gave me the opportunity of testing these models. This is another approach that we propose. All these had been published as well, so we can claim through that. They can go to the ref, etc., etc. So we're ticking all the boxes of the good research. And finally, this is another of the tools. This one in particular, I'm very proud of. It was developed with some colleagues from the Universidad de Monterrey in Mexico, with my colleague, Professor Bernardo Villarreal. So basically, we developed a similar tool to the one that I was mentioning, plus an approach. But this one was particularly useful for logistic companies. The other ones were for manufacturing. So this one is something that a logistic company could take and actually use and implement to identify in their logistic processes where they have environmental waste. And we actually were able to test it in DHL in Monterrey, Mexico, which is the third largest city in Mexico. And the result that we obtained, it was a massive, massive improvement. It was actually one of the strong elements, I would say, that we use in the impact case that the ref that we put forward and led for the previous one, the development of that tool, the implementation of that tool, and then the demonstration in a practical manner that actually the tool worked for DHL in Mexico. And just to finish the talk, it had been more than 50 minutes. Some conclusions very quickly. Environmental degradation is arguably the most critical challenge and danger that humankind is currently facing. Once more, hopefully, after these 50-something minutes, you contradict that. It's a huge, huge challenge that we have. Now, that challenge has come because of an industrial and economic development, which is positive, but it needs to be sustainable. Government and organizations have started to take action to address the problem. I have shown you a lot of approaches, a lot of tools that have evolved to try to address the problem. So if I could answer again that question, I would say, yes, we have tried to address the problem. Now, In particular, evidence suggests that supply chains have significantly evolved to address environmental issues, yes, and we got still a lot of problems, and by no means we are close to fully address it, but we have started to do that. Again, if you go back 15 years ago when I started in academia, there was nothing at all of it. So after 15 years, now there is plenty of research, plenty of interest, not only from academia, but from governments and companies. But still, we need to do much more with that one. I mean, as operation managers, we need to design more eco-friendly products, production, and transportation systems. And what I always tell the students, or when I give my lectures, I mean, especially for young people that go to industry, I mean, our profession of operation management is a very powerful one. So we can somehow, our societies, influence government and influence societies. What actually we can change our mind towards addressing that problem, because it's a very, very serious one. And it's something I tell my students, when you go to industry, you need to always be thinking on environmental aspect. Yes, you want your company to be economically successful. Yes, you want to grow the company. Yes, you want to maximize profit. But what is the impact on the environment of what you are doing? Something that you need to consider, because if you don't do that one, then the next generations might suffer in it. And a lot of people come and say, hey, yes, you talk a lot about the environmental sustainability, and yes, you look like kind of passionate in that field, etc., etc. Why do you do that one? And well, as I mentioned at the very end, so I think that we all have compelling resource, very powerful reason for doing that. And for me, you already know it. So is that reason? I mean, these two little guys, and I was telling you, so if our generation is not going to be affected for this, well, possibly their generation will. And if their generation is not affected because they were very, very lucky and somehow they do not accept affected, then the following generation might. And if not, the following generation. So at some point, we will have a big, big issue that needs to be tackled. And for me, that is the main reason as to why I do kind of plenty of research in this particular area, and why I feel very, very confident, well, very passionate, not confident, very passionate about working in this area. Does it work anymore? Yeah, thank you so much.